Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is Nausea. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of Nausea with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. Nausea is the first novel by the famous French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, published in 1938. Sartre is considered one of the most influential French writers and philosophers of the 20th century. He started as a novelist, and over time his work became more philosophical, but it maintained its fictitious plots as the background, while projecting his ideas. The French in general like to use a novel as their philosophical vehicle. Voltaire's Candide, Camus' The Stranger, etc., etc. Maybe it is the result of the Latin habit of being indirect, contrary to the Germans who prefer to make clear what they are doing or saying. I heard that French are writers who philosophize and Germans philosophers who write. Maybe that's why we usually don't consider French great philosophers. There is an obvious difference in the delivery style between the two. Also, German philosophers, most of them, dedicated their lives to their craft, excluding most other activities, and lived a somewhat isolated and solitary existence. Kant, Schopenhauer, or Nietzsche are good examples. On the other hand, French didn't seem to take it as seriously and led more balanced lives with a lot of entertainment and many adventures, sexual and others. Individuals like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Voltaire come to mind, and Sartre was no different. His ongoing collaboration with Simone de Beauvoir also included a sexual relationship, which was everything but exclusive. They even shared partners, since de Beauvoir was not very picky about the gender. Sartre's philosophical base was existentialism, with a bend to the left, a la Karl Marx, kind of existential communism. Céline's book, Voyage à bout de la nuit, or in English, Journey to the End of the Night, which Sartre read when it came out in 1932, was a big influence on his view of the individual life. But I think Céline, coming out later as a pro-Nazi anti-Semite, might have changed that. Sartre was also a self-declared communist without ever joining the Communist Party. He seemed more interested in individual efforts than any organization. For that very reason, he rejected the Nobel in Literature he won in 1964. He was a vocal supporter of the Soviet Union, but after the invasion of Hungary in 1956, he became pretty critical of it and seemed to have turned his attention more on anti-colonialism and his relation to the leftist ideology, becoming more interested in China and Cuba. And after the 1968 invasion of Czechoslovakia, totally cut himself from the Soviet communism. As with most intellectuals who were proven wrong in their support of the Soviet Union, Sartre used rational ignorance to explain his position. As we were neither members of the Communist Party nor its avowed sympathizers, it was not our duty to write about Soviet labor camps. We were free to remain aloof from the quarrel over the nature of the system, provided that no events of sociological significance had occurred. I think in general, people like Sartre or Camus saw communism as the lesser evil and an ally in their theoretical struggle against capitalism. But ironically, it was capitalism that assured them the freedom to be who they were. What is Nausea about? It is life as a meaningless wandering and observations, full of contradictions. Sartre's early reflections on life through fictionalized autobiography, his existential struggle, seemingly influenced by Descartes' I think, therefore I am. My thought is me, that's why I can't stop. I exist because I think, and I can't stop myself from thinking. At this very moment, it is frightful. If I exist, it is because I am horrified at existing. I am the one who pulls myself from the nothingness to which I aspire. I think he was wondering about his own existence in reference to general existence and meaning of life. A bit of the plot. The book is written in a form of daily journal entries. The protagonist, Antoine Raquetin, who is in his early 30s, seemingly has reached the limit of youthful ignorance and realizes it is time to think and reflect. He moves to a fictional town named Bouville, supposedly based on the port town of Le Havre, where Sartre spent some time. Antoine is there to write a biographical work about the life of a 19th century political figure, but spurred by writing about somebody who existed in the past, he becomes obsessed with his own existence. He's alone all the time with nobody to talk to. I live alone, entirely alone. I never speak to anyone, never. I receive nothing, I give nothing. So he thinks, and the thoughts lead him deeper and deeper into the questions with no answers. He spends most of his time wandering the streets, somewhat aimlessly, visiting different places, such as library, restaurant, etc., etc., and observing other people, trying to see any meaning in their actions, hoping to find some answers to his own existence. And that's the basic plot. What are my thoughts about Nausea? It is not an easy read, and the book is kind of tedious. It tries to present Sartre's early philosophical thoughts through the plot of existential agony, using the feelings of alienation, boredom, and confusion. I want to leave, to go somewhere where I should be really in my place, where I would fit in. But my place is nowhere. I am unwanted. It is young Sartre, for me already pretty nihilistic, but before he amalgamated different philosophies, moral doubts, and political influences, which contributed to him becoming somewhat of a contradiction later in his life. Supposedly, a few years after refusing the Nobel, he tried to claim the prize money. Also, throughout his life, Sartre cultivated the image of almost fanatical atheist. He said, I am not against God because I have no God. But in the last years of his life, facing death, he started to entertain the possibility of existence of God. I do not feel that I am the product of chance, a speckle of dust in the universe, but someone who was expected, prepared, prefigured. In short, a being whom only a creator could put here. And this idea of a creating hand refers to God. Many of his lifelong followers felt somewhat betrayed, and nobody more than his life companion, Simone de Beauvoir, who put all her trust in Sartre and his convictions. And feeling her own life was coming to the end, she might have started to have her own doubts, and even felt as she wasted a large part of it. But this is quite common. Being an atheist is easy when you are young and healthy, but once you are staring death in the eyes, you start to reconsider your beliefs, probably hoping this is not the end and there is some possibility of continuation. I remember once I found myself on the way to a combat zone where we believed we faced a high possibility of dying, a good portion of us, and as the result, a lot of the tough-talking guys suddenly became pretty religious. Sartre portrays life as a pretty mechanical, instinctive, and impulsive experience, even though the protagonist spends all his time analyzing and reflecting. It's quite an undertaking to start loving somebody. You have to have energy, generosity, blindness. There is even a moment right at the start where you have to jump across an abyss. If you think about it, you don't do it. He implies it is better to minimize thoughts, to be more spontaneous. And one spends a lot of time alone, and he reflects on its meaning. It is not accidental that people who come to profound conclusions are loners. He says many times in the book, I was alone, but usually when referring to the others, the phrase he wasn't alone is often used. He seems to find being alone as abnormal, and it makes him anxious and a bit paranoid. He realizes it might be necessary, but not good in the long run. For the first time, I am disturbed at being alone. I would like to tell someone what is happening to me before it is too late, and before I start frightening little boys. We come to this world through another person, but maybe this is just transitional. We desperately cling to this connection instead of letting it go and move on to create our own existential experience. Perhaps the point of our life is to learn to let it go through all the losses we suffer during our lives. There's also this under the surface constant fear. Wednesday, I must not be afraid. And one says, I am afraid, or he is afraid. He sees fear in others because there's fear inside of him, similar to his inner nausea he sees outside himself. And it is not the fear of the present, but of what might be coming as a result of his observations and thinking. He is afraid of the answers to the questions about his own existence, if he will be able to accept and deal with them. And the fear, thinking something is not right or missing, causes nausea. Actually, nausea is stimulated by what he sees outside himself, the lives lived by others. That's why 21 it feels as being outside his body. The nausea is not inside me. I feel it out there in the wall, in the suspenders, everywhere around me. It makes itself one with the cafe. I am the one who is within it. Nausea, being outside, means it is stimulated by what he sees, but to feel it, it has to be interiorized. It is the disgusting world he sees, probably thinking his life is or will become what he observes, and it transforms into nausea, which he finally realizes is inside of him because it is part of him, and he is part of it, the nauseous world. The nausea has not left me, and I don't believe it will leave me so soon. But I no longer have to bear it. It is no longer an illness or a passing fit. It is I. So the world is nauseous, but there is no escape from it because he is an integral part of it. On the other hand, somewhat as a contradiction, he feels pretty detached from society. A young woman, leaning with both hands on the balustrade, raised her blue face toward the sky, burned in black by lipstick. For a moment I wondered if I were not going to love humanity, but after all, it was their Sunday, not mine. He feels like an outside observer. This brings to mind the ideas explored by Krishnamurti in his writings, insisting that to have a clear view you must detach yourself, become an outside observer. And this detachment allows one to see life from the outside for what it is. And this brings us to the questions relating to life's meaning. Is there no meaning to our existence? Is it just pointless suffering? And if it is, the argument to have might be why not end it? And the implied answer is, if life is meaningless, so is death. And committing suicide would be proving or accepting the meaninglessness of our existence. I felt myself in a solitude so frightful that I contemplated suicide. What held me back was the idea that no one, absolutely no one, would be moved by my death, that I would be even more alone in death than in life. Maybe Sartre wasn't 100% convinced life is meaningless, maybe even hoped he might be wrong. His later life and work showed he had plenty of doubts. Further, Sartre writes, I have crossed the seas, I have left cities behind me, and I have followed the source of rivers toward their source, or plunged into forests, always making for other cities. I have had women, I have fought with men, and I could never turn back any more than a wrecker can spin in reverse. And all that was leading me where? To this very moment. He's asking why all the effort, and perhaps the answer is that life is a series of journeys which take us to the destinations that might explain the journey. But to see it, you need to disconnect yourself from the past. There is a song playing in Antoine's head, Someday You'll Miss Me Honey. Does it refer to his old, carefree self, or ex-lover he meets in a hotel room a few years after the breakup? The girl seems to represent the outside world and how it sees him, And it also represents how everything changes constantly. The past is gone forever and there is no going back, only starting over. There's only the present and the possibility of future. The meeting is the end of hope for the past, for both of them, and it sets them free to move on, to have a future. There is the struggle to be free, which means to free oneself from the past, and then one seems to arrive there. I am free. There is absolutely no more reason for living. All the ones I have tried have given way, and I can't imagine any more of them. I am still fairly young. I still have enough strength to start again. And after leaving his ex-lover's hotel room, he thought, I am alone in this wide, garden-rimmed street, alone and free, but this freedom is rather like death. Because cutting yourself from the past seems as dying, but later you are reborn as a new, different person. There seems to be a lot of Nietzsche's influence in Sartre's writings, at least in the earlier part of his life. I don't know if it was accidental, two unrelated individuals arriving at similar conclusions from similar experiences, or he didn't want to admit it because there were many things he didn't agree with Nietzsche about, especially after many of the latter's ideas were perverted to form the backbone of Nazi ideology. But philosophy is pretty mixed and related. Different philosophers might focus on specific ideas, but all of it seems to be a part of a singular idea, maybe the meaning of life, even if there are contradicting opinions. Further, there seems to arise a connection between Nausea and Camus' The Stranger for the people who read both. We can conclude from the publishing dates whom influenced whom, but just like with Sartre and Nietzsche, the question is how much and if it even was intentional. Besides having more of a plot, The Stranger takes the existential question a bit further by trying to prove there is no meaning, where Nausea lets you arrive at your own conclusion by simply following the life of the protagonist. To sum it up, Nausea is a good introduction to the earlier thoughts of Jean-Paul Sartre, which formed the base and were expanded to become his later theories. He had a kind of nihilistic view of the world, but approached life in a more of an existential way. There was also some stoicism in his preference for a simple lifestyle, well, stoicism as defined by the French. Of course, all these philosophies are relative, overlap, and build on each other. Sartre had many different phases. For example, in the 40s, he went from existentialist to humanist, probably influenced by the experiences of World War II, the crimes against humanity, which affected him, but he always maintained high appreciation for his first novel. Ultimately, I stand by one thing, which is Nausea. It's the best of what I have done. Ultimately, I stand by one thing, which is Nausea. It's the best of what I have done. Because there is no plot to focus your attention on, the book, what is written, makes you think about life and yourself. It highlights the absurdity and futility of human existence. It explores themes of identity, consciousness, and freedom, and presents a bleak vision of human life, in which individuals are trapped in a meaningless existential void. It implies all there is existence, which in a nihilistic definition is nothing. But everyone seems to be looking for a reason for their existence. For and one, it is writing the book, so the existence is a self-created thought, which doesn't necessarily has to be bad, but it is obvious how Sartre felt about it. But there is also some hope. Maybe our theories about meaning of life and existence are a product of our fears and hopes. Perhaps the meaning of life is to try to find meaning to life, and nobody succeeds because then life would lose its meaning, even though there are people who elude themselves in thinking they did find it. I think we all deal with existential questions, whether trying to ignore it, find meaning in little things, or spend a lifetime trying to figure out what is it. Perhaps we need to accept it, we will never figure it out, and let it go. And this might make our lives more bearable, easier. Maybe once you realize there is nothing or not much to lose, and everything in general is meaningless, you will become free and enjoy life more with less pressure, living on your own terms. This might be the existential secret as opposed to nihilism. There is hope that some meaning can be found in meaninglessness. This might be the existential secret as opposed to nihilism. There is hope that some meaning can be found in meaninglessness. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transform into hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A, naturally 10 height. I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I design the cover, and for this, I use this abstract painting of some individuals wandering in the city, seemingly aimlessly, but also they seem to be reflecting on what they are doing. I found this image relatable to the novel. This is the back with the blurb, and inside front cover, I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather-bound hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100. So if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel. And for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you're cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze, or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here. And until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.